Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Raw Dirt. The Raw Dirt team today is in the mountains of western Maryland on this cold winter day. The beautiful town of Oakland, Maryland. As you can see going down Main Street, some great looking buildings. This town known for its winter sports of skiing and also its summer sports of water skiing from just down the road from Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. This town was settled in 1862. It was the main line of the B&O Railroad. As you can see now, this is the old terminal for the B&O Railroad that we're pulling up in front of now. And it was a great site where some of the great steam locomotives of back in the 1800s were also pulling up back then. Just right across the street from the B&O Railroad is the Garrett County Museum of Transportation. And today, we're here to talk to two of the racing greats, Thorn and Joe Harvey, here in Oakland, Maryland. Stay tuned.
Welcome, race fans. Really cool to be with you here. A lot of fun to talk to some of the old race fans and drivers and mechanics from the past. A little bit of collaboration with Randy Murphy, mostly picture historian. He's behind the camera today. Also, of course, the voice of West Virginia, we'll call him, Pete Secret. Don't get your head too swelled, but one of my idols here. Always a big inspiration for me when I like to talk about racing. You know, you're the one who kind of inspired that when I was sitting in the grandstands at Morgantown Speedway in '78. So it's always fun to talk to you about racing. We know we're going to get a lot of stories. I don't know how many of them are true, but we'll figure that out. You know, over the years we just tend to make stuff up sometimes. I'm giving you a really hard time. That's not true, but we love it. Big reason we're here. Randy Murphy has opened up his home in Oakland, Maryland. We're in his basement right now. Really cozy setting here. Get to talk to the great driver, Thorn, who raced anywhere from coupes to sprints throughout north central West Virginia. A lot of success, particularly in the mid-'60s, I think, was his big era there. And of course, most people know Joe Harvey from the Pitt area. Most recently, standing beside the Frank Lewis number 98, I think. But before that, it was Dawn. So it's kind of cool to have both of you here. Dawn, I got to tell you, I hope this doesn't make you feel bad, but you're a little bit before my time. I didn't get to see you drive a whole lot. And for you or for me, you are mostly race car pictures holding checkered flags and your name in a record book. So we've met a few times before, but it's really, really cool to be sitting down and getting to share some of your history with some race fans out in the rest of the world, Dawn. We appreciate you taking the time to do this. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Pete, if that's okay, Pete.
Sure.
And we'll just go from there. I don't think there's a whole lot of an agenda here. It's just going to be four guys talking racing about stuff that maybe only interests us four, but that's okay.
Well, you know, this is another edition of Raw Dirt, and this is Raw. We drove into Oakland here just about an hour or two ago, and what a beautiful community it is. You know, just a picture us here in the western part of Maryland, and you know, you wonder, you know, back here in this great recreation area, how so many hot rods come out of this place. You know, I mean, you know, Joe and Dawn, you know, what was it, the water you drank up here? Or how in the world did so many fast race cars, no matter whether they be drag racers or street racers or around, tell us a little bit about the atmosphere back here and the way it is today, and also especially back when you guys were growing up.
It was just a thing. Everybody hung around the garage, and it was just a thing you did. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. You know, me and Dawn, been at it. Went at it pretty early, really. What was it, back in the 50s, I guess.
Well, my uncle, who started the D3 racing team, owned a garage there in Mountain Lake Park.
What was his name?
Ross Parsons. He had a
Parsons. S-O, yeah.
Yeah, and he was good friends with Speedy Seitz, who ran Deep Creek Speedway, who built it and ran it. And they were from Petersburg, West Virginia. And they'd both been in World War II, and they were real good friends. And when Speedy built the track, of course, my uncle was interested because he knew Speedy, and Speedy stopped at the garage all the time, a couple times, 2 or 3 times a week, just to talk racing and stuff, because we'd started, the first racetrack I ever went to was Elkins when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and my uncle just, that was his interest after the war, was going to races. And he had a gas station in Petersburg. He left Petersburg and bought the garage in Mountain Lake Park. And in 1957, he decided that Deep Creek was winding down because it was leased ground. Speedy leased the ground. He didn't own the ground. And Fort Ashby started up, and so
Speedy didn't own the property that
No.
Deep Creek sat on, is what you're saying?
No, he didn't.
He rented, okay.
He leased it.
Yeah.
And it was originally a dairy farm. That's where our fairground is now. It's where Garrett County Fairground
I didn't know that.
is on that property.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
there used to be a little airport. The fellow that owned it had a little airplane, and he let them use the track, but it just it was hard. They run Sunday afternoon, and it was just, the dust was just hard to handle. They didn't have good clay. So when it was winding down, this track in Fort Ashby started up about a year before, and so my uncle said he wanted to build a race car. Well, he wanted to build a race car for Deep Creek, but they quit before we got a race car built.
Oh,
So
okay.
we started going to Fort Ashby in 1957. And some of those guys, the year before, some of those guys that run Fort Ashby, my uncle talked them into, Speedy talked him into seeing if he could get some more cars. And he talked to these couple guys from Fort Ashby and that ran at Fort Ashby, and they brought their cars up, and they worked on them in my uncle's garage, and then they went to Deep Creek and ran, and it was back in the day.
So, so if you don't mind, let's go back a little bit. So you're a young boy, 11 years old-ish,
Yeah.
and you're going to Elkins Raceway.
Yeah, we're going
Who were some of the guys you rooted on? Who are some of the guys you looked up to?
Well, the ones I can remember was Glenn Brown Jr., Mark Beard, of course, my favorite driver was always Chet Moody, and he
That's a big name,
he
yeah.
came in there and won a lot of races.
Yeah.
And but the main thing that went on there was it was NASCAR, and it was NASCAR sanctioned, and if you ran there, you got NASCAR points. And Johnny Roberts came up there one whole year from Baltimore to run there in the sportsman class. And he ran with the modifieds, but whoever the first sportsman was, he got the points. And Johnny Roberts won the NASCAR National Championship that year with points from Elkins Speedway.
Wow.
And he ran 5 nights a week.
Yeah, back then that was
And
not too unusual. Yeah.
he was driving for Tony Slayton out of Baltimore.
See, I did not know that Johnny Roberts drove that 19 car.
Mm-hmm.
I did
Well,
not.
he didn't drive. It was number 7 then.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
changed the 19.
I just I always
Fanning.
associate the Slayton
Well,
car with
yeah,
number 8
right,
with
yeah.
Fanning and.
And I don't know what the deal was there, but when Johnny drove it, it was 7, and when
Yeah.
Ray Fanning drove it, it was 19.
Yeah.
And he had several other good drivers in his cars over the years. But he was originally from Elkins, Tony Slayton.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but it was very, very interesting. But that was my first going over there. And then, of course, in I think it was '54, NASCAR came there, and Lee Petty won the race.
Yep.
And I was just a kid, but boy, I can remember. And over there at one of your old timers things, I was talking to. He's the only person I talked to that said he was there. Was Roger Richards. He said, I said, I was here when that happened. We was looking at them old pictures and stuff, and he said, I was too.
Yeah, because his father, Paul, owned the cars that Dave Kurtz drove.
Yeah.
You know, the Gray Ghost '53 cars. So that's I didn't even think about that connection there. That's really cool.
Joe, you got involved with Dawn. Was that your first encounter, and how did that happen? Just hanging around the garage, or he needed help?
I lived right real close to the garage, and I got to going down there and hanging around. And I was kind of I was a drag racer originally, and had a Pontiac, and they'd let me use work on stuff in the garage, and like I said, I just lived a little ways from them. And I got to go into and I kind of lost interest in the drag race and got interested with Frank first, and then he went to service. And while he was in service, then I helped Don and his uncle, and we got the.
Now you mean Frank Lewis, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure the audience knows.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Frank was he went to service. Well, he and
I didn't know he was in the service.
we got to be acquainted in, I think, maybe '58 or sometime around that, and then like I say, he went to service then. Boy, I got involved with these boys going to the races and working on the old D3 then, and yeah, we had quite a time. Was running in Fairmont, and Morgantown, and Roseland, and
Is this before you were married?
no, that's the bad part.
So yeah, I can see where that might cause a little friction at home. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe the turkey isn't so warm on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun, and then of course Frank came back then, and we started running the old Pontiac then, and had that for a couple of years, and took this motor. I had my motor out of my '60 Pontiac, brand new, it was a new car. I took it to, it was Craig Motors at the time, had it blueprinted and balanced and everything, got it, and never really got it back in the car until we decided to build this race car. So my motor went into the race car. The old Pontiac was a 50, I think a 55, and I cut it up with a torch, and it had one rust place on the dig of your fingernail, and I cut it up, we made a race car.
Oh, jeez, those were the days.
Yeah, 122-inch wheelbase. That
Oh my gosh.
and Frank said you couldn't spin it all the way to do, just push the clutch in, it'd straighten itself up.
So I gotta ask you, Joe. I never. It takes a special person to work on the cars all through the week and watch somebody at the track go out and drive it. We know what the driver's motivation is. They get to have the fun, or at least the outward appearance of fun. What motivates a guy like? What was the motivation for you? And have you ever considered getting behind the wheel?
No, never did. Just warmed him up a couple times, is all I ever did do. I don't know, I just kind of a gearhead. I just liked fooling with the motors and stuff. I always liked working on them.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a lot of fun, but oh my, spent a lot of hours. Said start Monday night and work right on through the time to go to the races next night, every night. You know.
So we talked to Don a little bit about his 11 first time being at the races. I mean, obviously you went on to race several years, so that had a hook in you. What was your hook, Joe? I mean, what was it? Just mostly starting out in the garage helping and then going? Was that it?
Yeah, I just got, like I said, I got interested. I never went to the races until I believe it was about maybe 1958, sometime like that. When Frank had a coupe before when Donald and them ran down there.
Mm-hmm.
He had a coupe, and I helped him just a little bit.
Now, was that at Fort Ashby?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I raced at, or I worked at Baltimore, and got on when I got on strike. So I came back home. Well, when I did that, that's when I got interested in the race cars.
Oh, boy.
Didn't have nothing to do.
I was going to say, you're racing 5 nights a week, married, and working Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, then I moved back up here then, and we got into the racing, and yeah, Dawn and I we had a lot of fun. We worked. We also worked the same place.
We worked
too.
the same place.
Oh,
We worked
okay.
at the Paper Mill and Luke.
Mhm.
And
Paper Mill and Luke.
yeah, well,
okay.
I went to work there in '61.
Seen a lot of pulpwood hauled up there.
Oh, yeah. And Joe and I worked there a couple of years, so I really didn't know. I knew who Joe was, but I didn't know him until I went to work with him. Worked, and then we got hot rodding. But
That's
I worked
awesome.
at Ollie Beckman drove our car.
Okay.
Well, you've mentioned his son's name.
Gary, yeah.
Gary,
First
yeah.
race car I ever drove.
Yeah. So
Wasn't a good experience. I didn't do much.
Ollie, but I wasn't really old enough supposed to be in the pits, but I got in anyway. But we was lining up one night for the feature, and Ollie, I always would ride around with Ollie to get lined up, and they'd line them all up there, and then you'd take off back to the pits. And we're sitting there lined up in our place, and all at once somebody hits Ollie in the rear end, and banged the car, and he said, "What's going on? Who was that? Who hit me?" And I went back, and it was Frank. And it was an old 35 three-window coupe, is what it was, and it still had mechanical brakes on it.
Yeah.
So he couldn't stop the thing. And of course, when I told Ollie who it was, he just laughed. But, if it would have been somebody else that he didn't like, he might have got out and punched him in the nose. That's the way Ollie, he was a pretty tough character. But I'll never forget that night. Here it was Frank.
Your career didn't last that long. You know, 71 to 61 to 72. You were on the end of the coupe era. You might say the pre-war coupes. They were getting short and small in demand. Things were starting to change, and the coupe era was ending.
Yep.
And it was more into what they would call the cadet class and the modern day car. And of course, you jumped from the coupe into the sprint car. Now that was
That's what I wanted to do. 65, we won the modified championship at Brennan. That was a couple years after Brennan opened it back up.
And that's for those older or younger fans. That's Interstate 79 Speedway in Shinston.
Yeah.
It was Brennan's.
Brennan's bought it and still own it, I think.
Ted, yeah.
And they came to Morgantown one night and said, "We're going to open that racetrack up. You all want to come over, and we'd like to have a good car count if we open it up." And of course, Red and everybody, Tallman and all of them, you know, they was glad to have another place to run. So said, "Yeah, we'll come." So we went over there when they opened her and ran there till 65. We won the championship and in the modified class. Well, then they had the super modified class. That's when they were cutting down the rails, making rail jobs. And so the next year, my uncle, he decided he was going to take a year off. I don't know. So I went back. Well, we run Morgantown 3 times. Jim says if you can get 10 to 12 cars, we'll keep running the coupe.
Jim Kreitzer.
Jim Kreitzer, promoter at Morgantown, said, and because I loved Morgantown, that's my favorite track. But we went over there. We went over there 3 times, and we only got 6 or 7 cars. And I don't know why the other guys, because we was getting 12, 14 cars at Brennan, but they just didn't come. And me and Bobby Liston run the front. I won all 3 of them. And I think he was second in all 3 of them.
Wow.
But the other cars didn't come, so Jim said, "That's it for the coupes." So we just sort of, I guess that's one thing my uncle got. He liked Morgantown. He just said he wasn't going to run next year. So I went to Brennan and run 66. I drove for Harold Troy, T4. Harold had race cars for years, and he lived over at Mannington, and I knew him for a long time. Since I was a kid, I knew Harold. He's a real nice guy. And
Well, how did that relationship happen? So here you are, you're finding the following year after your uncle decides he's not going to race, you don't have a ride. So how did that how did that happen?
Well, a couple times when we broke, Harold would ask me to drive his car if we broke or something. So I knew him because he had a brother that worked for a gas company that moved to, they transferred him to Oakland. So I knew the family a lot more with his brother. And then one of his brother's sons worked at the gas station for my uncle. So I knew the family pretty good.
Okay.
But Harold was a real nice guy. And so I drove for him 66. And that's when I decided, you know, if I want to race, I got to go get a sprint car. So.
Let's talk about that championship. I think people need to know when you won that championship, who was some of the bad hombres. You know, they had cars coming from all this. The coupes were so strong. You had a guy named G.T. George who Mel Minnick drove a 145 stretched out Hudson. You had a guy named Billy Dahl who with a GMC 6-cylinder. You had a guy, Eddie O'Neill, called the Bumblebee, which was a coupe lowered and stretched and everything else. You had the car that Red Fredericks drove, J2.
Yep.
They were some still powerful and still tough
some
cars.
competition.
It was really good, wasn't it? Back then, you would never thought the music would die, would you?
And we didn't win that many races, but we finished second, third, and fourth in a lot of, all of them practically.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
But those were really good cars.
Yes. Yes.
Bill Dow drove the 145 and for a while, and then him and GT, something happened, and then Mel started driving it.
You had old Art Carnish, you know,
6
he had
and 7
6
8s.
and 7 8. Some great. These are innovative. These are guys who are mechanics. I mean, you know, you talk about those names like Art Carnish and G.T. George. Those guys were sharp.
Oh yeah.
They could make a car run.
That's interesting because to me, just from my era, those are only names in pictures that I see. I didn't know that, but you can tell exactly what you're talking about if you look at those pictures. You can see these guys they're on to something.
Yes.
You know, and they're experimenting, they're getting better. And that's just from a history standpoint, that's a hell of a class of competition to be against.
Joe, you helped with the car. Any secrets you guys had back in that old coupe and to make it just a little bit quicker with that competition we talked about?
You can't call on Kevin Rumley for this.
No, just hard work, I guess. And I really liked the fool with the old flatheads when we run the alcohol and stuff. That was good. We went to Morgantown or to Fairmont one night, and his uncle, he worked on the carburetors a good bit. We got over there and had the old D3, and what we did then, we didn't have a trailer or nothing like that. You just pulled an axle, and then you towed it behind the pickup. That's how you got it to the track and back. But anyway, we got over there and was kind of in a hurry and got to running, and I looked out, and boy, the alcohol, if you get it too rich, the manifold would get cherry red. Old Billy Dahl, out at 145, had old Hudson, the old manifolds used to get red on that thing. But anyway, we was really, really rich, and I told Ross, I said, that was his uncle, I said, we got to do something. We got too much jet in that thing. It's getting too much fuel. He said, okay, so we'll knock her down a little bit. So I took the carburetor. You could take them 97s and just unbolt them and then just lift them up and turn them a little bit. Then they had the screw that come up in the bottom, and you could change the jet without taking the carburetor apart. You just wrench up in and take them out. And I put the wrench up in there to take the jet out, and I said, Ross, did you put the jets back in this thing? He said, yeah. And I said, well, they ain't in there.
It's not there anymore. Oh my gosh.
That was really funny. He left the jets out of it.
That'd make you cherry red, yeah.
But that thing would really drink a lot of alcohol. Man, we had to go run for alcohol a lot. Had to go to Clarksburg mostly, I think, to get it.
Uniontown.
Uniontown.
Redhead Station up there.
We went to more at Clarksburg.
Yeah,
sometimes,
well,
too.
wherever you could get
Now
it.
that's a tow back in them days, or a
Yeah.
drop back in
Yeah.
them days.
Yeah,
And you had to buy a 55-gallon drum.
yeah, you had to buy a drum. You didn't.
You couldn't pump your 5-gallon can full. You had to buy 55 gallons.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
they kept it for the natural gas people. That's why they kept it. That's what it was for. They pumped it in the gas lines to keep it from freezing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. That's why the gas or the stations had alcohol, because they sold it to the gas companies.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That alcohol was really, that really brought them old flatheads
Oh.
to life.
Yeah.
It really made them run good. I
How many pistons did you go through a burn?
No, the motor run, the sweat would run off the intake
Cool,
when it
yeah,
fall.
yeah.
They would run.
Yeah.
Used to have these big radiators, Lincoln radiators, is what we used
Yeah.
all the time.
Lincoln
And
or
you run alcohol, you didn't have to have
You didn't
a
have
very
to.
big radiator.
we went to alcohol. We went from either a Lincoln radiator or a big Ford truck radiator to a '49 Ford car radiator.
Yeah,
That's what we
It just
went.
runs so much cooler.
Yeah,
And
and-
that's
and-
one of the big things that really helped.
And then on a cool night, we'd put a piece of cardboard in front of the radiator before we went out.
Get heat, huh?
To get enough,
Yeah.
to get to run warm enough. Yeah, it really
It was a
worked.
different world. But Red Fredericks always claimed that alcohol gave a flathead Ford 30% horsepower advantage. And it really, when you drove one with gas and drove one with alcohol, there's a world of difference now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to drill like them old 97s, you had to drill the jets way out, dump tubes had to be drilled out big.
Yeah.
Red Fredericks had a kit.
Yep.
He had a little kit, the right drill bit and stuff to drill all that stuff out with, and he
Wow, that's pretty slick.
He had a formula and he had a pack of some of the drill bits, real small.
yeah.
And but I'll tell you, I want to give the guy credit that experimented till he got those 97s on alcohol right, and that was Billy Vorbach, 2A.
Yeah, Bill Vorball. Yeah.
Yeah.
Morgantown.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was a millwright in some factory over there. Real good mechanic and welder. He built. He run good over at Morgantown, and but he fooled with that till he got it, and then he gave Red a copy of the size bits and everything.
You know, guys, it's just hearing these stories, Jimmy. You didn't, make a phone call and have your part UPS'd in, did you?
No.
Back then, it was everyone designing and everyone experimenting, and man, that's what made it great, wasn't it, guys? I mean, just trying to pick up some of the trade secrets.
Oh,
We all love running up front. Who doesn't? You
Yeah.
know, and we always want to. You make a call to your local chassis guy, and he gives you what's working and what isn't. Back then, I mean, you made the part and you experimented, and it wasn't just store bought. I mean, you fabricated a lot of that
had to,
stuff.
Yeah, there wasn't speed shops. I'll tell you, when we started in '57, or when my uncles financed it. I mean, it was his, but I helped work on it. I was pumping gas and working with garage and everything.
Now, how old were you at this time? Roughly?
57, I was 15 years old.
15.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we needed a part that we couldn't get from Craig's or someplace close by. There was no speed shops close by. Honest Charlie's in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
That was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
And that's where we ordered our parts. And in about a week, we would drive up to Aurora, West Virginia, to a motel where the Greyhound bus stopped. That's how we got our parts. They come on the Greyhound bus.
Yes.
Now-
Wow.
Oh yeah. And it took a while. Yeah.
That's high tech for back then. That's pretty smart thinking.
Yeah.
Well, that was it. There was no Ups or FedEx. It was a Greyhound bus. That's how we got our parts from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Wow.
The fuel pump. Do you guys run the pump?
Oh yeah.
How explain how that worked?
Well, when you run alcohol back then, you had a pressurized tank, because they didn't have a fuel pump that would pump alcohol back then.
Pressurized tank?
Yeah.
Sounds dangerous to me.
Well,
Was it not?
it could be.
I just think pressurizing alcohol, and that's
Well,
like beer and darts. I mean, I don't know if it does work too well.
our fuel tank was about a 12-gallon grease barrel, and we would that's what most people you made them out of, because if you had a garage and you had grease barrels from working or changing oil and greasing cars and stuff, and we would take and clean them out good, and we would put a 2-inch nipple in there with the cap, and then we would put the fuel lines, and we'd weld the head. You only had to put the head in one end. You'd take the lid, grind all the fasteners off, and then put it up there and weld her, and you'd run the first one I had, I made it out of a grease gun. I just took an old grease gun and cleaned it up good and put a new cup in it, and come out of the end of it, put a check valve, and run a line back to the top of the fuel tank. And you had a gauge, so you know how much you had, and you just pump it up. We always like to start at 15 pounds. Well, Joe'd pump it up. Usually it was pumped up when I got in the car. Him and my cousin, Donnie Parsons, one of them would jump in there and pump her up. That was the pit crew. And then every time I went by the flagman, I'd give her a couple shots.
Yeah, you'd have to give her a couple shots to keep up. It wasn't enough.
Oh yeah, the more fuel you burned, the less air pressure you had, you know. And
That's but back in that time, that's probably like a real I wouldn't say high tech, but very innovative. Maybe I mean that's a good solution to a problem.
well, that's what a lot of our ideas came from Red Fredericks, because he moved to Oakland in about 1956, I think, well 55 or 56, and he lived over in Loch Lynn, which was just across the railroad tracks from the garage there. And Red's been, Red was like family to us. I mean, we had, when him or Joanne had a birthday, we went to eat cake, and they come to our house, same thing. And all my knowledge, most of my knowledge about racing came from Red Frederick. But I thought it was, I mean, I think back now about Billy Warbaugh giving him that formula for them carburetors,
Yeah.
because we were competitors with
Yes.
him, you know.
Yes.
And but that's Billy was a nice fellow. He was a good fellow, and he left. He got transferred to down around Charleston, the company he worked for, and that's why he left Morgantown. But he had a couple cars. When they started making real jobs, he made one of them, but he had a flathead in it, and it wasn't going to run with the Chuck Moody's and them guys that had the big overheads.
So another big fabricator back then. I don't know about innovator. Maybe you could help me with that. Gary McCauley.
Oh, Gary.
Yeah, very good fabricator. He built a lot of race cars. Did you have any? Did you have much contact with Gary at all?
Oh, yeah, a lot of contact. He showed me a lot of things. That he built a sprint car. He just built it, and he showed me how he did the rear ends. You know, he'd take the housings and cut the rivets out and shorten up the rear ends. And
I've heard people use the term genius.
well, he was a pretty sharp dude, and he was an excellent welder.
Yeah.
That was his trade. He was a welder.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, Red told me a couple stories about him. Red knew him real well.
Now you talk about yin and yang there. Am I right? I mean, you got Red. I mean, who's I don't know about it early days, but squeaky clean, and you got the ornery. He enjoyed life. We'll just say that. Gary McCauley, and that's like yin and yang, man.
Yes.
You know.
Well, you know, it's you can be friends with somebody and really maybe not appreciate their actions, but Gary, we was over there at Morgantown. You know how you went down there, and Mrs. Baker was in the Jeannie was in there taking your money, you know, to get in the pits, and we're there in line one night to get get our pit passes, and Gary pulls in with that crazy looking sprint car. That one was painted all funny looking. He pulled in there with that thing, and everybody was laughing at him in his car, and he got out of that pickup and he said, "I'll tell you one thing right now. I'm mean when I'm drinking, and I'm drinking a little bit all the time." He was always cracking jokes. He was a cool guy.
He loved life. You could tell.
He was a cool guy.
Yeah.
Don, we talked about the coupes and everything. Your sprint car career was short. It was a short career, but you were behind on equipment real quick. What things in the sprint cars had innovated really quick. You had Frank Chips, you had Glenn Groves, you had the Compton brothers, and a lot of good race cars were starting to roll. Then you had that Pennsylvania invasion of Gus Linder, Bobby Adamson, and then you had the Ohio River invasion of the Dixons and JD, and so you had stepped into a real hotbed into a fire.
I'd watch him go by.
You had best seat in the house.
Tell us about that sprint car, though.
Well, when 66 was the end of the coupes. I drove Harold's car, then I knew they were done. They wasn't going to race any place in our area. And everybody was going to, when I ran at the Roseland with that little car that me and Joe built, it was a 30 by 90. And, and we run a sportsman class at Roseland. And their rule came out at the end of 64. We ran down there with the D3 coupe a couple times, and then they changed the rules for 65, and they went with the sportsman class was they went 30 by 90, and we built one that winter, the winter of 64. We built it from scratch, Model A frame, and the back of a Model A sedan, what the cab was. That's the one that we was thinking about. Joe, we was thinking about Joe's Pontiac motor and running Super, but we'd had to buy a quick change rear end, and and we had bought I don't know, probably $500 worth of tires, and I didn't. I don't think we was into spending that kind of money.
Joe, did you look at him and say, we're in this, we're taking a knife to a gunfight here, but go ahead.
That's why the Pontiac motor ended up in Frank Lewis.
Okay.
We built that car in the winter of 64 from scratch, and these seat belts in here, and see, I put the steering on the right side, which some of them do and some of them don't. But I bought the triangle piece that bolts into the spindle for the tie rod end to go in. I bought that from Mom's Charlie, and I bought the seat belts from Mom's Charlie, and the rest of it was Junkyard or Sears Roebuck. Sears Roebuck had a catalog then. I ordered the brake shoes and the wheel cylinders and stuff for this car out of the Sears Roebuck catalog.
Jimmy, now it's a time when you had the Long brothers out of Quaker City, Ohio. You had Gene Tallman driving for the 5 car out of Wampum, Pennsylvania. You had the Macmillan Engineering car. You had the Dixons and Gus Linder. We talked about Bobby Adamson, but also you had a young Billy Casella from Weirton, West Virginia. Went on to become a USAC national champion that was coming to Morgantown. So Morgantown all of a sudden is a hotbed of racing, and you're in the middle of it.
I'm behind it. But I enjoyed doing it.
Yes.
We bought a car. I bought the car. Joe and I went to, when I decided I wanted to do it, Joe and I went over to Howard Summers' garage one day, because Howard Summers had this car, and talked to him about it, and he said, told him, wanted to get into it, but didn't have too much money to spend, and this guy had the car for sale that he got it off of Howard, and so Howard said, well, you can make it go. It'll run. It'll go. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving you a real salesman pitch there.
Well, no, he knew the situation we was in, because he had, when he worked on Freddie's cars, they were new Travises. I mean,
Yeah, Freddie Johnson.
Right
Yeah, I forgot about Freddie.
And so I bought it off the guy, and we towed it over and parked it by my house, and I forget what I paid for it, like $450 or something.
Okay.
Yeah, and then there again we was debating on the Pontiac motor, and then that didn't. We just couldn't get together. And I don't know. I didn't have. Well, neither one of us. We both worked for a living. I mean, we didn't own an asphalt plant or anything. So we ended up. Red said, "I'll help you with it," and so Red.
Was that financially or mechanically?
No, Red. Well, mechanically and financially, and he had a pickup to tow it. See, the trailer came with it. I got the trailer with it. All we needed was
For $400.
$4 or $450.
That's amazing.
And
yeah.
And so Red said, Red wasn't driving. He took a couple years off. He didn't drive in. That was '67, and he didn't drive at all in '67. '68, then we knew Sprinters was done over there, so we decided, well, we better get rid of it. And my uncle, then he wants to get back in, and he builds a '58 Ford for Red to drive, and so that's how Red got started back driving his '58 Ford, and we sold the sprint car to GT George for mail to drive at Jennerstown. So we got rid of it, and then they took it up there, and I think they blowed the motor up eventually the rest of the year, and then they took it home, put it in GT's garage, and then GT's garage burnt down that winter.
Yes, that's right.
And that car was in it, and it
I
burned
didn't
out.
hear that story.
Yeah.
But Red's got this. He used to drive for a guy named Whitey Bennett, number 95. Had a body shop in Oakland and won a lot of races with that car. It wasn't a sedan, it wasn't a coupe. It was a 32 Victoria, they call it. It had a smaller. It looked like a sedan, but had a lot smaller back window. And really good car. Red won a lot of races with it, and that's when Red moved over to Oakland. He was driving for Whitey. That was another reason he moved. Plus, he got a job at the stone quarry for Rudder Brothers, who Speedy Sykes was running the racetrack, and he gave Red a job to have more car count down.
And that was Sonny Vetter's uncle.
Yeah.
That was Sonny's
Wow.
uncle.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was Sonny. It was Vetter Brothers Stone Quarry, and Speedy had married his wife was a Vetter, a sister to the two Vetter brothers, and that's how they were from Moorfield, and they ended up out there because they had worked in a stone quarry over at Petersburg, and they ended up starting that one.
Joe, this going on now, it's 1967, he's in and out of sprint car racing. What are you doing at this time? Who are you with?
That's when Frank and I started,
Yeah.
I think, pretty much. I think I brought, it was in '67, I think, '66 or '7, that we were at Daytona, and we went to see a fellow, his name was Corky, I believe, but he was a Firestone man. And we went over in the pits and bought 2 of those 8-inch treaded Firestone tires and brought them home in the trunk of my Volvo. I had a little Volvo car. Brought them home, them 2 tires home, and we had a couple bags of oranges we'd bring them back. We couldn't get them in there, so we took the oranges out of the sack and throwed them in the tires. And but that's when we started. That's what we put on the Pontiac when we got started. That was where we were down there at Daytona that year. and brought them home. And got the old Pontiac to go and run. Had lots of traction. Them was really, but Bobby Liston got a couple of those back when we were running Fairmont at the interstate. And I don't mean to tell you when nobody could catch him for a few weeks until other people started to get hold of that stuff. I mean, they was
That big of a difference.
They were they were.
What was it? They were just so soft, or
they were soft and they were like 8 inches wide or something like that. You know, wider. You know, the tires we used on them coupes back then was just as big and wide a tire as you could come up with. You know, wasn't no race tires for them. You know, and those Firstones were, man, they were really nice.
So Bobby Listons figured this out. So back then, you didn't have internet.
No.
you didn't have a cell phone to record things. How quickly do secrets get out to the competitors?
When he showed up at the racetrack and started to running off from everybody, everybody started hunting him.
Yeah.
You know,
They knew immediately what the deal was.
Yeah,
Huh?
we knew had to have better tires.
Yeah, they were running what Frank's treads or recaps weren't they at that
Something,
time?
yeah,
Yeah,
from
hard.
Hawks and Tread at the time.
Yeah.
In Oakland, they had some pretty fair looking tires and stuff like that. We didn't have good tires until those came along, but they really worked well. But,
Gladfeldy's recapped them, what was it, Vogues? Remember them Vogue tires?
yeah.
They were a bigger, wider tar than Goodyear or the others. And they had a good cap for on that. You come up with about I think 7.5 inch
Something like
tread on there. And that's what we run on the right front, on the coupes and the other cars. It was a good tar for getting the neighborhood blacktop place.
Joe, you're just getting going right now. You're catching your second win at this game called racing, and Don, you're starting to wind down now at 68, late 60s, and your career is what happened? The sprint car put you out, or what? Just no home, or I mean nowhere to go with the racing.
I'll tell you what happened. That sprint car deal. Red bought a brand new motor off of a Chevrolet garage up at, I think it was Connellsville. The guy that owned it was originally born and raised in Deep Creek Lake. And he knew him, and he owned a Chevrolet garage, and he sold us a brand new Corvette motor in the crate. And I think Red paid $460 or something for it. And we put it in that old rail job. And so we had around $1,000 in that thing, and we went over there and we run it all of '67, and we run it all but I think two races in '68. And Jim said this is the last year. We put it up for sale, and GT George bought it, and we never spent a penny out of our pocket. We got out of it what we had in it, and every week we go, Red says we got to make $50 to break even, and we did. And we would run 9th or 10th, and they paid enough that it paid our bills. So that was racing.
And you know, Don, funny thing is, it wasn't very long after that date that Jim Kreitzer made the decision. Now the sprint cars were gone. He pulled the plug not very long after that. So now you lost your coupes in '66. Now you're in the you see the future of sprint cars at Morgantown heading down. So you're a man with no country,
right?
Basically,
That's a good way of putting it.
But I think what we did with what we had, because one year Jasper Petit bought Betty Chrysler a Travis. That was $6,500 just for the chassis.
Yeah.
The next year, all faders started out running Travis. Jasper bought Buddy a new all fader.
yes.
How can
Yes.
we run $1,000 car against them?
Yeah.
But we had fun and it didn't cost anything.
Yes. Yeah.
And you had success.
Yeah.
So we're hearing all these dollar amounts of what you spent. What's the
Yeah.
most money you ever won in one race? Do you know?
I forget. We had a couple good finishes over there, But see, the sprints then, they only paid $500 to win. The sprints at Morgantown was $500 to win.
That's pretty good money back then.
Oh, it was good
Yeah,
money
that's
for first, but it went 5, 3, 2.
Hot dog and a Coke. Yeah.
And what happened was they wanted more money, and they struck. They either pulled out or wouldn't go in one night. And
I've heard stories about that.
Jim played. They were running them on Friday night at Interstate and Saturday night,
Yeah.
and it was a hotbed of sprint car racing.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
all of a sudden the lights went out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was darkness for the sprint guys, and sprint racing died in Central West Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
That-
had to have
that
the
day.
money, you had to have the money to get them.
Yes.
Just like they're still Williams Grove, Sealings Grove, Port
Yeah.
Royal, they're still there.
Yeah.
And but my goodness, they're paying them like $5,000 to win a regular show, you know.
So not long after that, then your last race was what, 1971?
72. My uncle, he worked for Schaefer Ford Garage in Oakland, and Schaefer said, "I got a car out there if you want to."
Fended over there.
Yeah, that's it right there. And I'm going to tell you something.
Yeah,
When
right.
we cut that car up, there wasn't a rust spot. But he
Street
had,
Rodders loved you guys, didn't they? Every day. I mean, I bet you they're home just.
he had that car, and the motor was bad in it. And he told my uncle, said, "If you want to go racing, you can have that car." And so he decided to go racing. So we built that thing up, and we run it over at Morgantown a couple of years, and in '72, I was gonna build a new car because Bernard Keenan and them guys come out there with these cars that they had chopped down, they lowered them down, they narrowed them up, and I thought, well, if we want to run, we got to have one. We got to build a new car and build a hot rod, and I got a '64 Ford over at the junkyard. Made the deal with the guy, got a frame. I got it off frame all marked how we was going to shorten the wheelbase and narrow it up and everything, and had the body gutted. And it was a '64 Fairlane. I mean, that's what Bernard was running, I think. And I thought, well, I'll build a race car. Built that little one. I can build a little late model. And we went to Florida that year to Daytona. I went like 35 years in a row or something. I come back and I thought, let's get on that 4-long. And my wife informed me that we was going to have a daughter. That's the end of my
What
race.
did you go and do that? There's a racing.
That's the end of my racing career.
Yeah, ended it bluntly.
Yeah,
Really did,
yeah.
really.
Yeah. That was it. I just quit.
Joe, you stuck around, and your career was just taking off, and you were with a guy and for a lot of years, that Frank Lewis, and man, you know, what can you say about Frank Lewis? You know, he was a guy, very strangely, when he would win, they loved him, and they loved him no matter what. He was that type of guy that you had to like him, and if you talked to him and met him, you definitely liked him after that.
Yeah.
He never was accused of dirty driving or anything. So it had to have been a pleasure and an honor for you to spend that many years with that guy. You couldn't ask for a better guy to get with, wasn't it?
No, he was a splendid guy to be friends with. He really was. Yeah, we really had a pretty long hitch there. Yeah, we were friends for up until a year or so ago, I guess.
Yes.
We died. And biggest part of our friendship was all around racing, though. You know, we ran to the races a lot, and of course we had the cars and stuff for a lot of years. And good friends, yeah. He was a very, very nice person.
Yes.
Yes, he was. Yes, sir.
Jimmy, I know you.
I'm not going to repeat the story, but
No, it's okay. But Frank was just a great guy. You know, you guys, you're still into racing. I mean, you still go.
Yeah.
And Dawn, I know you still go a little bit and get around. And is the love still there, or I know things have changed like we all do. You guys look great I mean, you couldn't, I mean, you really do. You know, is there any regrets or anything that you wish you would have did? I know we look at those trophies behind and the championships that you've won, Dawn, and things you've accomplished from 3 or 4 different racetracks, Roseland, you know, in the Brennan's, and of course the other ones. You can't ask for anything more, could you?
I had a good, I really
Good
enjoyed
ride.
what I did. I grew up with it, but I never quit going. I mean, I still went to Daytona up until 2001 was my last trip. And my first trip to Daytona was 1957 on the beach.
Wow.
And
So you got to witness a beach race then.
Oh yeah, 57, 58.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know I still see you quite a bit, still wanting to get underneath one of them cars, but just quite can't get back out of one. That was, I mean, can't get back up. So you've pretty much been leaning on them for the last few years, but that's okay.
Yeah, we had, like Randy and I, we did Elkins. I think he missed one night and I missed one night at Elkins this year. Yeah, we still I like to go yet. I still do. I never quit really. I never lost. Now Frank had a spell there where when he quit, he kind of didn't go for a while and stuff. But I never did quit. I never quit going. I still. Like
I know some guys who
So they
once they quit, they couldn't go back
Yeah.
because they missed it too much.
Yeah.
Jimmy, this has been great. I tell you what, we're about out of time, and we're coming up on our time limit. And man, it's been great talking to you guys. Take us through the years and things that we've learned tonight. That it's just been great, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me to. Of course, we've met several times before, Dawn, but it still is. It's cool for me to sit down and kind of hear what's going through your mind as things are changing and developing. Because until I met you, what, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, you were a name in a record book and a racer holding a checkered flag, but I never really got to interact with you.
Well, I quit before you started.
That's pretty much, yeah. That's right on the cusp. Right on the cusp. So it's a lot of fun for me because I love the sport. I love the history of it. You guys paved the way. I mean, you guys were the one who put asses in the stands every week to keep keep it going. And both of you guys, I mean, just as a race fan, I appreciate what you guys did. I mean, as pioneers like you guys who keep moving the sport or keeping it alive. You know, if it was a graph, it would probably go like this, right? You know, dirt racing. And sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like this. But we always have to have guys like you to even make that happen. And we appreciate it very much.
Dawn, Joe, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Jimmy, another edition of Raw Dirt. And it's been fun. And we'll see you next time on another edition of Raw Dirt. Thank you.